Hello and welcome to this Beyond Shakespeare Exploring session. I am Robert Crighton, your host, and today we are looking at Tamburlaine the Great, Part 2. Yes, someone persuaded Christopher Marlowe to write a sequel. We've started our early look at the beginning of Act 1 in the previous episode. And we're now continuing, depending on what edition you have. We are looking at either scene 3 or scene 4 of the play. But basically, we're going from when Tamburlaine enters. And it's the first time we've met Tamburlaine in this part. We've had a couple of scenes, 2 or 3 scenes of everybody else, and we've been introduced to the politics of the moment. We have the son of Bajazeth. Callapine has vowed revenge and escaped from imprisonment, and we also have a strategic alliance of various armies from various countries and various different religions and various different cultural backgrounds, who have all decided to set aside the fact that they really like killing each other to fight Tamburlaine instead. So that's where we're at in the narrative. But now, briefly, to introduce you to our readers today, all the way from somewhere not near me, playing Tamburlaine, Sigismund's messenger, Callapine, and son is...
Hello, I'm Heloise Spring, and I'm an actor based in London.
Lovely. And playing one of Tamburlaine's son, Calyphas, Techelles, Gazellus, Soria, and Olympia is...
Try saying that with your mouth full and a little bit of alcohol in you. No, I'm only joking. My name's Sascha, and I'm an actress and choreographer and general professional performer based in Brighton in the UK.
And reading today's Zenocrate, Orcanes, and some random pioneers is...
Hello, I'm Sarah Blake. I'm a writer, actor and director, and I run a little audiobook company called Sounds Curious.
And reading a whole gamut of random people. One of the sons of Tamburlaine, Amyras, Usumcasane, Baldwin, Trebizon, and some soldiers, and possibly somebody else, if I've made a mistake, is...
Hello, I'm William Sutton, and I'm an actor based in Amsterdam.
And playing another one of sons of Tamburlaine, I think, Celebinus, and also Frederick, Uribassa, first physician and captain, is...
Hi, I'm Alan Scott. I'm not an actor.
And I, as your host, Robert Crichton, am also going to be reading Theridamas, King of Jerusalem, and Almeda, or possibly additional people, as well as stage directions. Anyway, without further ado, we will rejoin the action and say hello to Tamburlaine himself. Enter Tamburlaine, Zenocrate, and their 3 sons, Calyphas, Amyras, and Celebinus, with drums and trumpets.
Now, bright Zenocrate, the world's fair eye, whose beams illuminate the lamps of heaven, whose cheerful looks do clear the cloudy air and clothe it in a crystal livery. Now rest thee here on fair Larissa plains, where Egypt and the Turkish Empire part between thy sons, that shall be emperors, and every one commander of a world.
Sweet Tamburlaine, when wilt thou leave these arms and save thy sacred person free from scathe and dangerous chances of the wrathful war?
When heaven shall cease to move on both the poles, and when the ground, whereon my soldiers march, shall rise aloft and touch the horned moon, and not before, my sweet Zenocrate, sit up and rest thee like a lovely queen. So, now she sits in pomp and majesty, when these, my sons, more precious in mine eyes than all the wealthy kingdoms I subdued, placed by her side, look on her mother's face, but yet methinks their looks are amorous, not martial as the sons of Tamburlaine. Water and air, being symbolized in one, argue their want of courage and of wit, their hair as white as milk and soft as down. which should be like the quills of porcupines, as black as jet, and hard as iron or steel. Berets they are too dainty for the wars, their fingers made to quaver on a lute, their arms to hang about a lady's neck, their legs to dance and caper in the air. Would make me think them bastards, not my sons. But that I know they issue from thy womb, that never looked on man but Tamburlaine.
My gracious lord, they have their mother's looks, but when they list their conquering father's heart. This lovely boy, the youngest of the three, not long ago bestrid a Scythian steed, trotting the ring and tilting at a glove, which, when he tainted with his slender rod, he reined him straight, and made him so curvet as I cried out for fear he should have fallen.
Well done, my boy! Thou shalt have shield and lance, armour of proof, horse, helm, and curtle-axe, and I will teach thee how to charge thy foe, and harmless run among the deadly pikes. If thou wilt love the wars and follow me, thou shalt be made a king and reign with me, keeping in iron cages emperors. If thou exceed thy elder brother's worth, and shine in complete virtue more than they, thou shalt be king before them, and thy seed shall issue crowned from their mother's womb.
Yes, father, you shall see me, if I live, have under me as many kings as you, and march with such a multitude of men as all the world shall tremble at their view.
These words assure me, boy, thou art my son. When I am old and cannot manage arms, be thou the scourge and terror of the world.
Ah, but why may not I, my lord, as well as he, be termed the scourge and terror of the world?
All a scourge and terror to the world, or else you are not sons of Tamburlaine.
But while my brothers follow arms, my lord, let me accompany my gracious mother. They are enough to conquer all the world, and you have won enough for me to keep.
Bastardly boy, sprung from some coward's loins, and not the issue of great Tamburlaine. Of all the provinces I have subdued, thou shalt not have a foot, unless thou bear a mind courageous and invincible, for he shall wear the crown of Persia, whose head hath deepest scars, whose breast most wounds, which, being wroth, sends lightning from his eyes, and in the furrows of his frowning brows harbours revenge, war, and death, and cruelty. For in a field whose superficies is covered with a liquid purple veil, and sprinkled with the brains of slaughtered men, my royal chair of state shall be advanced, and he that means to place himself therein must armed wade up to the chin in blood.
My lord, such speeches to our princely sons dismay their minds before they come to prove the wounding troubles angry war affords.
No, madam, these are speeches fit for us. For if his chair were in a sea of blood, I would prepare a ship and sail to it, ere I would lose the title of a king.
And I would strive to swim through pools of blood, or make a bridge to murdered carcasses, whose arches should be framed with bones of Turks, ere I would lose the title of a king.
Well, lovely boys, ye shall be emperors both, stretching your conquering arms from east to west. And, sirrah, if ye mean to wear a crown, when we shall meet the Turkish deputy and all his viceroys, snatch it from his head, and cleave his pericrianion with thy sword.
If any man will hold him, I will strike, and cleave him to the channel with my sword.
Hold him, and cleave him too, or I'll cleave thee, for we will march against them presently. Theridamas, Techelles, and Casane promised to meet me on Larissa plains, which hosts a peace against this Turkish crew. For I have sworn by sacred Mahomet to make it parcel of my empery. The trumpets sound. Zenocrate, they come.
And there we'll pause. So much to chew from this little scenette. We have the three sons. I think, because Alan, before we started, raised the question of how old are the children, but also what is the passage of time since the previous play. And it feels to me, I'll see if what the room thinks, that they seem at this stage in the play to be quite young.
Yeah.
or at least a reasonable span, and that they're expected probably to get older the next time we see them. That's looking a little ahead. We'll see where we go. And that we're already seeing the question of who are they following? Are they following their father's martial side? Are they following their mother's side? And the pressures on them to be like their dad is really interesting, and what makes him immediately say that one of them is a bastard because he's not enough like his father for suggesting something slightly different. Thoughts in the room? That's a really interesting little dynamic scene.
The thing that occurred to me about it was, obviously, Tamburlaine is a narcissist. This fact has been established. but what you get to see in this scene is you see the narcissist at home. You see him, he's not just taking it all out on the battlefield. He's actually you see him in his personal relationships, just kind of, this great warrior failing miserably, really, as a father, because his narcissism is such that, my boys are like me, they chip off the old block, and the one who isn't gratifying his need for, praise and to see himself reflected in their beings. The one who isn't doing that is immediately just, dismissed and denied and just treated very cruelly, actually. And it's interesting that Zenocrate, she does say to him, well, they're a bit young for this kind of talk right now. But she doesn't actually pull him up on the fact that he's really quite mean to one of his sons, which is interesting in itself. I think, after all these years, she's probably still scared of him.
It's interesting because the first speech was from Zenocrate. I don't know if others felt that, but it felt like quite a different voice to what we had in part one.
Yeah, weary.
Breaking my rule here about trying to treat this as a play, we missed part one. It does seem like a different person, or the passage of time. And how long is this passage of time? It's presumably only 10 years or so, but 10, maybe 15, depends on the range of the age of the sons as well, because you do get the impression that some are much older than others.
I would go with maybe 15 years, because I would put the sons as being 10, 12, 14 respectively.
That feels,
with the 12-year-old being the one who's perceived as being a wimp.
Yeah, because it's Calyphas, who. It's interesting. His final line in that little sequence is to suddenly sort of try and be more aggressive.
Yeah,
like he's learnt that maybe even if he doesn't think it, he should pretend.
Yeah,
he's overcompensating for his earlier position.
And my feeling was that with Celebinus, the one I was reading, is that he's the top infants who's trying to prove that he's a big boy, really. So there's a lot of braggadocio in there.
How did Tamburlaine, your opening there? How did you feel having joined us at a later stage in this process? This is very much your first real stab at Tamburlaine. How does he come across to you?
I completely agree with the narcissism thing. Just he loves them as much as they resemble him. I think I do find it so interesting that he desires these enormous things. He desires, world conquest, basically. And yet he does seem to have a genuine, it might be in a completely narcissistic way, but he does seem to have a genuine interest in his family life. He does genuinely seem to have a love for Zenocrate, and he does seem to at least have an interest in his sons, whether it's a, truly loving fatherly one.
It's a controlling interest, isn't it, with everyone?
Yeah, control. That's definitely.
I wonder if we're back to the perennial Tudor problem of the succession issue.
Well, I think that's possibly a theme that's really going to run through this play, is having conquered the world, what do you do with it, and how do you secure it? Because ultimately, what do you do when you are no longer there? And succession is hugely important. If you have an empire, how do you keep it together? How do you pass on property? Who gets it?
It's interesting. It does say, he's willing to give he's willing to pass everything on to the younger son. He's willing to pass it on to whoever's most like him. So it literally is just, whatever way that I can keep living forever, basically.
And this question of succession is witnessed in many plays, earlier plays than this. That question of what happens when you have too many successors. Things tend to go horribly, horribly wrong. We can look back to Gorboduc. We can look back to the early King Lear, and lots of plays really touch on this. Anyway, we're now the gang are coming back on. For those who have seen part one, we're getting some more friendly faces as the gang of three, Tamburlaine's trusted lieutenants, come in. So enter Theridamas and his train with drums and trumpets.
Yes. Well, Theridamas, king of Argia.
My lord, and the great and mighty Tamburlaine, arch monarch of the world, I offer here my crown, myself, and all the power I have, in all affection, at thy kingly feet.
Thanks, good Theridamas.
Under my colours march 10,000 Greeks, and of Argia and Afric's frontier towns, twice 20,000 valiant men-at-arms, all which have sworn to sack Natolia. 500 brigandines are under sail, meet for your service on the sea, my lord, that marching from Argia to Tripoli will quickly ride before Natolia and batter down the castles on the shore.
Well said, Argia. Receive thy crown again.
And we'll just briefly pause there. He knows how to butter his parsnips, doesn't he? He's played this game before as Theridamas. I'm primarily pausing here just for the audience at home, just so that the sons don't say anything else in this scene, and so they are all now going to become lieutenants, just so everyone is aware. And depending,
just a quick flag up.
Yeah.
In the version I've got here, you said marching from Argia to Tripoli. I've got launching.
I've got launching. Yeah, no, I just read it wrong.
Oh, right, okay.
wrong teeth in.
Yeah, that does happen. We're not here to be perfect. We're not gods. We have feet of clay. Yes, so we have additional lieutenants coming in now until the rest at the end of the scene. And again, depending on your edition, these little scenettes might be paginated as separate scenes, though it's the same action. So we run to the end of the act. Enter Usumcasane and Techelles.
Kings of Morocco and of Fez, welcome.
Magnificent and peerless Tamburlaine, I and my neighbour King of Fez have brought to aid thee in this Turkish expedition 100,000 expert soldiers. From Azamor to Tunis near the sea is Barbary unpeopled for thy sake, and all the men in armour under me, which with my crown I gladly offer thee.
Thanks, King of Morocco. Take your crown again.
And mighty Tamburlaine, our earthly god, whose looks make this inferior world to quake, I here present thee with the crown of Fez, and with a host of Moors trained to the war, whose coal-black faces make their foals retire, and quake for fear, as if infernal Jove, meaning to aid thee in these Turkish arms, should pierce the black circumference of hell, with ugly furies bearing fiery flags, and millions of his strong tormenting spirits, from strong Techelles until Biodol, all Barbary is unpeopled for thy sake.
Thanks, King of Fez. Take here thy crown again. Your presence, loving friends and fellow kings, makes me to surfeit in conceiving joy. If all the crystal gates of Jove's high court were opened wide, and I might enter in to see the state and majesty of heaven, it could not more delight me than your sight. Now we will banquet on these plains a while, and after march to Turkey with our camp, in number more than are the drops that fall, where Boreas rents 1,000 swelling clouds, and proud Orcanes of Natolia, with all his viceroys, shall be so afraid, that, though the stones, as at Deucalion's flood, were turned to men, he should be overcome. Such lavish will I make of Turkish blood, that Jove shall send his winged messenger to bid me sheathe my sword and leave the field. The sun, unable to sustain the sight, shall hide his head in Thetis' watery lap, and leave his steeds to bear boots charge, for half the world shall perish in this fight. But now, my friends, let me examine ye. How have ye spent your absent time from me?
My lord, our men of Barbary have marched 400 miles with armor on their backs, and lain in leaguer 15 months and more. For since we left you at the Sultan's court, we have subdued the southern Galatia, and all the land unto the coast of Spain. We kept the narrow strait of Gibraltar, and made Canaria call us kings and lords. Yet never did they recreate themselves, or cease one day from war and hot alarms. And therefore let them rest a while, my lord.
They shall, Cassani, and 'tis time, i' faith.
And I have marched along the river Nile to Machda, where the mighty Christian priest called John the Great sits in a milk-white robe, whose triple mitre I did take by force, and made him swear obedience to my crown. From thence unto Cazates did I march, where Amazonians met me in the field, with whom, being women, I vouchsafed a league, and with my power did march to Zanzibar, the western part of Afrique, where I viewed the Ethiopian sea, rivers and lakes, but neither man nor child in all the land. Therefore I took my course to Manico, where, unresisted, I removed my camp, and by the coast of Bayatha at last I came to Cuba, where the Negroes dwell, and conquering that, made haste to Nubia. There, having sacked Borno, the kingly seat, I took the king, and led him bound in chains unto Damascus, where I stayed before.
Well done, Techelles. What saith Theridamas?
I left the confines and the bounds of Africa and made a voyage into Europe, where by the river Tirus I subdued Stoka, Podolia, and Comedia, then crossed the seas and came to Oblia, and Niagara Silver, where the devils dance, which in despite of them I set on fire. From thence I crossed the gulf, called by the name Mare Majore of the inhabitants. Yet shall my soldiers make no period until Natolia kneel before your feet.
Then will we triumph, banquet and carouse. Cooks shall have pensions to provide us cates, and glut us with the dainties of the world. Lacrima, Christy, and Calabrian wines shall common soldiers drink in quaffing bowls. Aye, liquid gold when we have conquered him, mingled with coral and with orient pearl. Come, let us banquet and carouse the whiles.
And off they all go to carouse. It's really interesting here. It's a bit of a catch-up session. You know, what have you been doing on your holidays? And there was a question I wrote down, which the scene immediately answered, which was, you know, at no point you feel that these lieutenants want to try and supersede Tamburlaine. And I was wondering why. Why is it this is so stable? And of course, he's got them busy murdering and killing and doing that thing that empires can do in their early stages, which is force all their problems outward. And, you know, so the center doesn't need to worry about holding, because all your generals are off fighting, doing fighty things, and they're having, you know, their fun within their lights. And that's why Tamburlaine's court is at the moment so stable, is because everybody's busy. And now they're coming back for a bit of a reunion to do what the dream team is back in the room. Thoughts about this little sequence?
Yeah, I mean, they're basically set up as being a gang, and I think I would agree with you that it's very much the same sort of statecraft that the Romans applied. Get your generals out murdering barbarians rather than fighting in the Senate.
And we do have an interesting take on the various peoples that they encounter, and they're very bold about this travelogue that they do and the language used there. Any thoughts there?
Well, I was thinking that it's very much the same as what happened in the first two scenes, with the nomination of all the different countries that were coming together. Here it's just a nomination of the countries which have been subjugated in the meantime. And I'm just thinking from an early modern audience point of view, what is this reflecting? Is this reflecting something for them, a widening of the imagination, or is it, I mean, there were already a lot of these peoples had visited London, if not were inhabitants of London at this point. In the mid-1580s, we've got North American Indians, we've got an Eskimo paddling his canoe up and down the Thames. I mean, you know, so who is he speaking to with these things? I mean, just outside of the world of the play at the moment, but from the point of view of reception from the audience also.
Yes, because we are building, recent studies are increasingly building a very clear picture of London as a much more multicultural city than you know, 20, 30 years ago people were thinking. Right. I mean, we were doing some Tarleton jests. Tarleton was an actor.
Oh, yeah.
And one of them features a story where he basically vilifies a person of color in the street for great amusement of the crowd. And the thing is, you don't tell that story unless that is a commonplace. You know, right. However slightly uncomfortable that story is, it's not an unknown thing. And there's still a lot of work to be done there in uncovering these stories. And that's a really good point about who is in the audience, and what's their experience. Any other thoughts following on from that, or else?
Well, one that's just occurred to me looking at that last short speech of Tamburlaine, I'm almost wondering whether there was some sponsorship involved in the performance, because it actually brings in a brand name. Lacrima Christi is the sweet white wine of Sicily.
Oh, of course it does. Yes, you're right.
Because I looked at it first time and thought it doesn't make sense if it's actually the translation of the Tears of Christ. And then I thought, oh no, hold on a minute, that's a bit of branding there. So you almost wonder and now a word from our sponsor.
Wow.
That's a really good thought. I love that.
That's a wonderful thought.
That's a good point, actually. And you do wonder as well as the whole scene progresses, you know, if we're talking about branding as such, you know, it's not just a name drop, but something that did occur to me as I was reading that. And that is really and truly, now he's in this position, although it seems like a very simple catch-up, you know, if we follow on the idea of they're now a band, I'm wondering if it's actually less of a band and more a brand, so to speak, because some of the wording is so familiar and so on point that I'm wondering if this is more than just a normal catch up of what's been happening strategically wise in the world. This is actually a subtle way of saying, look, you're not just dealing with me here, you are dealing with us as a brand.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that does. I think that's a really good point. And it also reminds me of something that sequels do today in films, where you have the pulling of the team back together, and you sometimes get it in heist things as well, where you're the part of the fun of the opening of the first act or so is getting the team together and finding their mojo as well. And in this, they find their mojo straight away. They are team Tamburlaine. They are brand Tamburlaine. I think that's a really nice way of looking at it, actually, that they're all on brand. They're all on message.
Yeah.
And one thing that I noticed, but I didn't think it was that important, but it actually really ties in with what Sascha was saying about brand and what you were just saying. You've got those references again to Boetes and Boreas, the wind and the stars. He uses those in part one to, fire up his men. And then he refers to them again in this scene when they all get back together, and it's like harking back to the old days, getting the gang back together and using that same language to kind of settle everybody in. And it's like, oh yeah, we're all here again. We haven't changed. We're still doing our really, good stuff.
I'm still in my 20s.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Like, oh yeah, it's like the good old boys back together. Yeah.
I mean, are you almost getting into this? This could be a fraternity group, eat a bit of pie.
Yeah. And the question is also how successful they are. Is this some of this forced? Is this rehearsed? Is this the kind of pomp they always do? How much of this kind of stuff has Tamburlaine himself been doing in these intervening years, or has he been at home and not on the battlefield? Has he put on a bit of weight? The physical dimension to this. Yeah. I don't want to go too far with this because but this has been a great tangent. I really like this.
There was one Greek reference actually which did confuse me slightly, because at one point it's referred to as infernal Jove. A page or so back from where we are at the moment, which is an unusual usage.
But they do. I think there is an interesting of the way the characters mash references together, and I think Sarah made a really good point. That they're using a similar repertoire. It's an interesting question how much classical learning, or the kind of classical learning that has filtered out into the popular culture of the time, because there are interesting roots in popular culture whereby an audience would be expected to know some of these things, like popular song. There's not an expectation that the audience will have read a lot of this stuff, but there's an awful lot of popular songs, for example, mentioning Troy and singing about this. So a lot of these references, there might be actually quite a small repertoire that just keeps getting used again and again, rather than showing off learning. It's actually feeding into something else. But I think we should move a little bit further forward. We're into Act 2. And we have some interlocking scenes again, where some of you may be jumping from character to character, but hopefully in a logical way whereby your character stops talking for a while. If it goes horribly wrong, we'll find out in a moment. However, we have Sigismund and Frederick and the previously silent Baldwin, who we don't think is probably a clown, but much to my chagrin. So we have this, the opposing army is meeting. Enter Sigismund, Frederick, and Baldwin with their train.
Now say, my lords of Buda and Bohemia, what motion is it that inflames your thoughts and stirs your valours to such sudden arms?
Your Majesty remembers, I'm sure, that cruel slaughter of our Christian bloods, these heathenish Turks and pagans lately made, twixt the cities of Dula and Danubius, how through the midst of Varna and Bulgaria, and almost to the very walls of Rome, they have, not long since, massacred our camp. It resteth now then that your Majesty take all advantage of time and power, and work revenge upon these infidels. Your Highness knows the Tamburlaine's repair that strikes a terror to all Turkish hearts. Natolia hath dismissed the greatest part of all his army, pitched against our power betwixt Guthia and Ormius Mount, and sent them marching up to Belgassar, Acantha, Antioch, and Caesarea, to aid the kings of Soria and Jerusalem. Now then, my lord, advantage take thereof, and issue suddenly upon the rest, that in the fortune of their overthrow we may discourage all the pagan troop that dare attempt to war with Christians.
But calls not then your grace to memory the league we lately made with King Orcanes, confirmed by oath and articles of peace, and calling Christ for record of our truths? This should be treachery and violence against the grace of our profession.
No whit, my lord, for with such infidels, in whom no faith nor true religion rests, we are not bound to these accomplishments the holy laws of Christendom enjoin. But as the faith which they profanely plight is not by necessary policy to be esteemed assurance for ourselves, so that we vow to them should not infringe our liberty of arms and victory.
Though I confess the oaths they undertake breed little strength to our security, yet those infirmities that thus defame their faiths, their honours and religion, should not give us presumption to the like. Our faiths are sound, and must be consummate, religious, righteous, and inviolate.
Assure your grace, 'tis superstition to stand so strictly on dispensive faith, and should we lose the opportunity that God hath given to venge our Christians' death, and scourge their foul blasphemous paganism, as fell to Saul, to Balaam, and the rest, that should not kill and curse at God's command, so surely will the vengeance of the highest and jealous anger of his fearful arm be poured with rigour upon our sinful heads, if we neglect this offered victory.
Then arm, my lords, and issue suddenly, giving commandment to our general host with expedition to assail the pagan and take the victory our God hath given.
So, the Grand Alliance seems to have gone a bit wrong here. I think it's fair to say. It's like religious intolerance has won out over pragmatic nationalism.
Or pragmatic internationalism.
Well, yes. It's weird. Are we expected to follow these infinite number of cities and locations? Because there are so many in this play.
Just thinking about it, there is an absolute glut of atlases that have just come out on the market.
Yeah.
Brown and Hogenberg brought out theirs, I think, in the late 1570s, early 1580s. So this, I mean, it could be that he had a copy of that in front of him and was just picking names out, because it's insane how many place names are in this. You know, it would be fascinating to make a map and just hook up all the bits, all the countries that are named within this one play.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to, if we did a live reading of this, you know, that's what I'd want, projections at the back doing a sort of Dad's Army swoop.
Right?
Whoa.
Because it's, I say, what's the dramatic function of this? I mean, apart from to just impress in some way, it's very odd because it's continual in this particular play. We had a bit of this in part one, but it really, every scene seems to begin with a list. And it is odd because we don't get, it disguises the meat of what's actually happening in the scene, because it took me a while to go, oh, they're doing some betrayal. Oh, right.
Well,
Yeah.
I want
So, Heloise.
I was going to say, when you said the thing about you almost want to kind of draw a map and draw everything, connect everything up, I think then the next step would be to actually calculate how long it would take to travel between all these places. Like the scale is so huge, and probably, I'm sure if you actually did calculate it, it would, you know, the numbers, it would be ridiculous. It would be kind of prove that all these exploits in practice would have actually been impossible. But I think just the sheer scale and breadth of places that all these characters casually list kind of it furthers. They all seem to perceive themselves as gods. Like obviously Tamburlaine does so the most. He truly views himself as equal. At least that's what he aspires to. But I think all the characters have a bit of a sense of the world is huge, but I'm bigger. And so I think all of them listing all the countries.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry?
I was just going to say, is it literally just to make this feel epic?
I was going to say that actually. I wonder if this is Marlowe piling it on, because in essence he's only got a bunch of Tudor actors on a fairly small stage, and he can't show all the battles, and he can't show all the charging about and conquering new worlds. So he's just throwing it all in at the audience to kind of create this sense of, epic wars going on and spreading out over the world, because he can't actually show it. He's got to create this sense of it, maybe.
That's a good point, because what we now know about the archaeology of a lot of the early theatres is that actually their stages were quite small, and that the theatres themselves, we haven't quite got to the point where people are building slightly larger stages and slightly larger playing spaces. So actually, the reason why we haven't had many pitched battles, they all seem to happen while somebody else is having a cup of tea, is structural. I think it's they physically can't tour it. They can't quite fit excessive numbers of bodies on stage as in the way that you could 10, 15, 20 years later, when these, to be fair, these plays are still in the repertoire. And that's something that recent archaeology is really, really highlighting now, actually, that the stages are relatively smaller than will come when the globe is built and anon.
I'm just wondering, I'm just trying to think, having missed the first part of part one, I have a feeling Tamburlaine's actually supposed to have originated from what would now be northern China, and has effectively got himself across to Jerusalem, Cairo. When we then get the bragging that we had in the previous one of the general who'd gone down as far as Zanzibar, similar sort of distance.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I mean, it's huge distances are being travelled here. Huge. And let's not try and pretend that any of this is necessarily accurate. I don't think it matters whether any of this is literally true, and I'm not going to worry about history in this forum. Anyway, I think we better move on, because we've gone the betrayers. Let's move over to the betrayed. So we may have some people literally jumping from one to the other, as we're going to Orcanes' camp with Gazellus, Uribassa, and their train, and Orcanes starts us off.
Gazellus, Uribassa, and the rest. Now will we march from proud Orminius Mount to fair Natolia, where our neighbour kings expect our power and our royal presence to encounter with the cruel Tamburlaine, that nigh Larissa sways a mighty host, and with the thunder of his martial looks makes earthquakes in the hearts of men and heaven.
And now come we to make his sinews shake with greater power than erst his pride hath felt. As 100 kings by scores will bid him arms, and 100,000 subjects to each score, which, if a shower of wounding thunderbolts should break out of the bowels of the clouds, and fall as thick as hail upon our heads, in partial aid of that proud Scythian, yet should our courages and steeled crests, and numbers more than infinite of men, be able to withstand and conquer him.
Methinks I see how glad the Christian king is made for joy of our admitted truce, that could not but before be terrified with unacquainted power of our host.
But lo, enter a messenger.
Dread sovereign and my noble lords, the treacherous army of the Christians, taking advantage of your slender power, comes marching on us, and determines straight to bid us battle for our dearest lives.
Traitors! Villains! Damned Christians! Have I not here the articles of peace and solemn covenants we have both confirmed? He by his Christ, and I by Mahomet.
Hell and confusion light upon their heads, that with such treason seek our overthrow, and care so little for their prophet Christ.
Can there be such deceit in Christians, or treason in the fleshly heart of man, whose shape is figure of the highest God? Then, if there be a Christ, as Christians say, but in their deeds deny him for their Christ, if he be son to ever-living Jove, and hath the power of his outstretched arm, if he be jealous of his name and honour, as is our holy prophet Mahomet, take here these papers as our sacrifice, and witness of thy servant's perjury. Open, thou shining veil of Cynthia, and make a passage from the imperial heaven, that he that sits on high and never sleeps, nor in one place is circumscriptible, but everywhere fills every continent with strange infusion of his sacred vigour, may, in his endless power and purity, behold and venge this traitor's perjury. Thou, Christ, that art esteemed omnipotent, if thou wilt prove thyself a perfect God, worthy the worship of all faithful hearts, be now revenged upon this traitor's soul, and make the power I have left behind, too little to defend our guiltless lives, sufficient to discomfort and confound the trustless force of those false Christians. To arms, my lords, on Christ still let us cry. If there be Christ, we shall have victory.
And we'll just pause there. The nature of the betrayers here and the people being betrayed, the tearing of the articles, and it's interesting. It's the Christians who do the betraying, which I think is a really interesting point there.
Right.
Marlowe really is equal opportunist in terms of dismissal of various cultures, and including his own. Which really, I think, goes in credit to his favour. I would like to discuss this in a moment, but I think we'll just let's just dispatch. Let's go into the battle. So we're going into the next scene here. Sigismund is going to enter here, and Orcanes will enter in a moment, having successfully done some fighting here. So, alarums of battle. Enter Sigismund wounded.
Discomfited is all the Christian host, and God hath thundered vengeance from on high, for my accursed and hateful perjury. O just and dreadful punisher of sin, let the dishonour of the pains I feel in this my mortal well-deserved wound end all my penance in my sudden death, and let this death, wherein to sin I die, conceive a second life in endless mercy.
And so Sigismund dies. Enter Orcanes, Gazellus, Uribassa with others.
Now lie the Christians bathing in their bloods, and Christ or Mahomet hath been my friend.
See here the perjured traitor hungry, bloody and breathless for his villainy.
Now shall his barbarous body be a prey to beasts and fowls, and all the winds shall breathe through shady leaves of every senseless tree murmurs and hisses for his heinous sin. Now scalds his soul in the Tartarian streams, and feeds upon the baneful tree of hell, that zoacum, that fruit of bitterness, that in the midst of fire is engraft, yet flourisheth as Flora in her pride, with apples like the heads of damned fiends. The devils there, in chains of quenchless flame, shall lead his soul through Orcus' burning gulf, from pain to pain, whose chain shall never end. What sayest thou yet, Gazellus, to his foil, which we referred to justice of his Christ, and to his power, which here appears as full as rays of Cynthia to the clearest light?
'Tis but the fortunes of the wars, my lord, whose power is often proved a miracle.
Yet in my thoughts shall Christ be honoured, not doing Mahomet an injury, whose power had share in this our victory. And since this miscreant hath disgraced his faith, and died a traitor both to heaven and earth, we will both watch and ward, shall keep his trunk amidst these plains for fowls to prey on. Go, Uribassa, give it straight in charge.
I will, my lord.
And Uribassa exits.
And now, Gazellus, let us haste and meet our army and our brothers of Jerusalem, of Soria, Trebizon, and Amasia, and happily, with full Natolian bowls of Greekish wine, now let us celebrate our happy conquest and his angry fate.
So perishes betrayers. And I'm warming to Orcanes here. He has a lovely logic there of, the Christian was undermined his own moral principles, and therefore he deserved to die. And I'm not going to, I'm not going to damn Christianity. He was a bad Christian and therefore deserved to die. And there's a certain integrity to that as a logical precept.
He's about the first person we've met, isn't he?
Yeah.
Actually got some integrity.
I think.
So die all oath breakers.
Yeah, which is, flatly different to Theridamas' journey, which so far has been betray your master and you're fine. But who says there has to be logic throughout these things? It's really interesting. Act 1 was sort of set up of this alliance, and then almost immediately this alliance just crumbles.
And I think we prefigured that yesterday's discussion.
Yeah. We didn't think it was going to last, and we were right. Any additional thoughts? Because the act isn't over, but in a sense, the war side of things is all going to fall to one side. So, any last thoughts on this particular alliance? No, we're all a blank. We've said what we need to say. Okay, so going back to our second scene with Tamburlaine in this play. And this isn't the martial hero that we've come to watch. I heard there was going to be fighting and excitement and really wild things. But no, here enters this scene. The Amyras is drawn, and Zenocrate is discovered, lying in her bed of state. Tamburlaine sitting by her, 3 physicians about her bed, tempering potions. Her 3 sons, Calyphas, Amyras, and Celebinus, Theridamas, Techelles, and Usumcasane.
Black is the beauty of the brightest day, the golden ball of heaven's eternal fire that danced with glory on the silver waves, now wants the fuel that inflamed his beams, and all with faintness, and for foul disgrace, he binds his temples with a frowning cloud, ready to darken earth with endless night. Zenocrate, that gave him light and life, whose eyes shot fire from their ivory brows and tempered every soul with lively heat, now by the malice of the angry skies, whose jealousy admits no second mate, drawn in the comfort of her latest breath, all dazzled with the hellish mists of earth. Now walk the angels on the walls of heaven, as sentinels to warm the immortal souls, to entertain divine Zenocrate. Apollo, Cynthia, and the ceaseless lamps that gently looked upon this loathsome earth, shrine downwards now no more, but deck the heavens to entertain divine Zenocrate. The crystal springs, whose taste illuminates refined eyes with an eternal sight, like tried silver run through paradise to entertain divine Zenocrate. The cherubims and holy scraffins that sing and play before the King of Kings use all their voices and their instruments to entertain divine Zenocrate. And in this sweet and curious harmony, the gods that tunes and this music to our souls holds out his hand in highest majesty to entertain divine Zenocrate, Then let some holy trance convey my thoughts up to the palace of the imperial heaven, that this my life may be as short to me as are the days of sweet Zenocrate. Physicians, will no physic do her good?
My lord, your majesty shall soon perceive, and if she pass this fit, the worst is past.
Tell me, how fares my fair Zenocrate?
I fare, my lord, as other empresses, but when this frail and transitory flesh hath sucked the measure of that vital air that feeds the body with his dated health, wane with enforced and necessary change.
May never such a change transform my love, in whose sweet being I repose my life, whose heavenly presence, beautified with health, gives light to Phoebus and the fixed stars, whose absence makes the sun and moon as dark as when, opposed in one diameter, their spheres are mounted on the serpent's head, or else descended to his winding train. Live still, my love, and so conserve my life, or, dying, be the author of my death.
Live still, my lord. Oh, let my sovereign live, and sooner let the fiery element dissolve, and make your kingdom in the sky, than this base earth should shroud your majesty. For should I but suspect your death by mine, the comfort of my future happiness and hope to meet your highness in the heavens, turn to despair would break my wretched breast, and fury would confound my present rest. Let me die, my love. Yes, let me die with love and patience. Let your true love die. Your grief and fury hurts my second life. Yet let me kiss my lord before I die, and let me die with kissing of my lord. But since my life is lengthened yet a while, let me take leave of these my loving sons, and of my lords whose true nobility have merited my latest memory. Sweet sons, farewell. In death resemble me, and in your lives your father's excellence. Some music, and my fit will cease, my lord.
They call for music.
Proud fury and intolerable fit, that dares torment the body of my love, and scourge the scourge of the immortal god. Now are those spheres where Cupid us to sit, wounding the world with wonder and with love, sadly supplied with pale and ghastly death, whose darts do pierce the centre of my soul. Her sacred beauty hath enchanted heaven, and, had she lived before the siege of Troy, Helen, whose beauty summoned Greece to arms and drew 1,000 ships to Tenedos, had not been named in Homer's Iliads. Her name had been in every line he wrote. Or had those wanton poets, for whose birth old Rome was proud, but gazed a while on her, nor Lesbia nor Croina had been named, Zenocrate had been the argument of every epigram or elegy.
The music sounds and Zenocrate dies.
What? Is she dead? Techelles, draw thy sword, and wound the earth, that it may cleave in twain, and we descend into the infernal vaults, to hail the fatal sisters by the hair, and throw them in the triple moat of hell, for taking hence my fair Zenocrate. Casane and Theridamas, to arms! Raise Calyphas higher than the clouds, and with the cannon break the frame of heaven, batter the shining palace of the sun, and shiver all the starry firmament, for amorous Jove hath snatched my love from hence, meaning to make her stately queen of heaven. What god soever holds thee in his arms, giving thee nectar and ambrosia, behold me here, divine Zenocrate, raving, impatient, desperate, and mad, breaking my steeled lance, with which I burst the rusty beams of Janus's temple doors, letting out death and tyrannizing war to march with me under this bloody flag. And if thou pitiest Tamburlaine the Great, come down from heaven and live with me again.
Ah, good my lord, be patient. She is dead, and all this raging cannot make her live. If words might serve, our voice hath rent the air. If tears our eyes have watered all the earth, if grief our murdered hearts have stained forth blood, nothing prevails, for she is dead, my lord.
For she is dead. Thy words do pierce my soul. Oh, sweet Theridamas, say no more. Though she be dead, yet let me think she lives, and feed my mind that dies for want of her. Where'er her soul be, thou shalt stay with me, embalmed with cassia, ambergris, and myrrh, not lapped in lead, but in a sheet of gold. And till I die, thou shalt not be interred. Then is in as rich a tomb as Massel's we both will rest, and have one epitaph, writ in as many several languages as I have conquered kingdoms with my sword. This cursed town will I consume with fire, because this place bereft me of my love. The houses burnt will look as if they mourned, and here I will set up her stature, and march about it with my mourning camp, drooping and pining for Zenocrate.
The arras is drawn. So, no overreaction there to the death. It's just raising the odd town. I think we've all been there. A couple of interesting little things. So the mausolus, I think there is sort of the Uber. The mausoleum was a mausolus. There was a big, very large tomb somewhere. I think we came across this in another play.
It's one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
Yeah, there's a specific monument that's referring to there. But also we've got, earlier we had cavalleros, so that's a form of gun, isn't it? I seem to recall. So it's aiming something as high as the heavens to fire the ultimate cannon shot to wake up the gods. Tamburlaine takes that well, I think. I think that takes it well. I think we might have a motivation for him going back into war here. Might be part of the point of this. Thoughts?
Well, I think. Sorry.
Go, William.
Okay, I think first off, it proves that he was in love with Zenocrate from the first moment that he met her, until this moment that she dies.
Yeah. Heloise, you were going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's so interesting that he says all this, and he's quite vulnerable. You know, he's this great ruler, and says that you need to his sons that you must be, violent, and you must be kind of terrible and great like me in order for me to acknowledge you as my sons. But that doesn't mean that you can't be emotional in Tamburlaine. He seems completely okay with being incredibly open in this scene in front of the physician, in front of his sons. It's just interesting because it's so different from now, kind of the thing of suppressing your feelings.
Well, yes. I mean, the idea of what the way we display emotions have changed a lot over time, and Tamburlaine has spoken this way about Zenocrate a few times, and but as William was saying, this is the definite, absolute proof that this was love all the way, however controlling and slightly sinister elements of it may have been. Sarah, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was, because I absolutely agree with William. He does genuinely, it's proved he genuinely loves her as far as he's able to love. But one thing I noticed about this scene is he has this, oh my God, this beautiful, heartbreaking speech while she's lying there kind of semi-comatose. the minute she kind of stirs and he starts talking to her, all of a sudden it's all about him again. It's like, oh God, I can't live without you. I am going to have to kill myself. And she's even on her deathbed, she's the one having to say to him, oh no, you must live, because otherwise that will make me suffer even more. So you must live for me. And it's like, it's not about you, mate. She's the one who's dying. And yet he still manages to make it all about him. And then after she's died, it's like, okay, yes, he's in the absolute pits of grief and despair. But what's his kind of end game as a result? What does he think will be a good way of working out his grief? Oh, I'll go and burn a town and kill all the inhabitants. It's like, it's I think it's a fascinating scene because clearly he does deeply love her, but it also shows the limitations of how capable he is of loving, which I don't think they're not that great, those that they're fairly contain those limits, because it always comes back to him and his grief and his rage and his desire to destroy. So
and there's a question of how prefigured this was in the first scene as well. Was Zenocrate ill? I mean, I think if we were staging it, she'd because the way that speech was, when we were saying it didn't quite sound like she had been in the previous part. Might be, you probably stage it where she's looking a bit frail.
She did sound weary in that first speech where she's like, oh man, are you still going to be going to war? How long is this going to take before you'll finally, she did sound weary. So yeah.
Well, also, she's got 3 sons. I'm assuming that any daughters that Tamburlaine has do not get a look in the terms of this narrative. We have to assume that that she didn't just have 3 sons. I'm sure, and there's a whole other world that Tamburlaine ignores. Is something I'd probably look at. Though that's again possibly being a bit too modern, but that's fine.
The one line that was occurring to me throughout, and I'll probably get shouted at, she should have died hereafter.
Right. I'm going to put you on a timeout. I will do it. I can mute you from here.
Can I just make a word choice point?
Yeah.
Where he says, or dying be the author of my death. Now, we're commonly told there was no such thing as an author back then. So what on earth are they referring to right here?
I do not know the answer to that.
Interesting one for the OED, I think. That
right?
one.
Does it mean author as in creator? Maybe.
Yes, it must. It must.
Yeah, it must do.
Yeah, or somebody who starts and creates something at least.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's how I'd read it.
But it's most definitely not the writer writing down as a self-reference to himself as author of the play.
I think that's a question for the internet to let us know what you think on that.
I'll do David Crystal on this one.
Yeah. Okay, that's Act 2. We move into Act 3, and lots of different things are going to go on here because the winner of the little bust-up of allies is going to team up with Tamburlaine's arch enemy. The son of Bajazeth is going to get his revenge. Or is he? Who knows? So we have also a whole host of kings, and hopefully the doubling all works on this. Various people are joining in because we've got lots of random people in the background who may also be in this scene. And again, I suspect there might be some listing going on. So enter the kings of Trebizon and Soria, one bringing a sword and the other a scepter. Next, Orcanes, king of Natolia, and the king of Jerusalem with the imperial crown. After, Callapine, and after him other lords and Almeda. Orcanes and the king of Jerusalem crown Callapine, and the others give him the scepter. Orcanes speaks first.
Callapinus Celebinus, otherwise Sibelius, son and successive heir to the late mighty Emperor Bajazeth, by the aid of God and his friend Mahomet, Emperor of Natolia, Jerusalem, Trebizon, Soria, Amasia, Thracia, Illyria, Carmania, and all the 130 kingdoms late contributory to his mighty father. Long live Callapinus, Emperor of Turkey.
Thrice worthy kings of Natolia and the rest, I will requite your royal gratitudes with all the benefits of my empire yields, and were the sinews of the imperial seat so knit and strengthened as when Bajazeth, my royal lord and father, filled the throne, whose cursed fate hath so dismembered it, then should you see this thief of Scythia, this proud usurping king of Persia, do us such honour and supremacy, bearing the vengeance of our father's wrongs, as all the world should blot his dignities out of the book of base-born infamies. And now, I doubt not but your royal cares have so provided for this cursed foe, that since their heir of mighty Bajazeth, an emperor so honoured for his virtues, revives the spirits of all true Turkish heirs, in grievous memory of his father's shame, we shall not need to nourish any doubt, but that proud fortune, who hath followed long the martial sword of mighty Tamburlaine, will now retain her old inconstancy, and raise our honours to as high a pitch in this our strong and fortunate encounter. For so hath heaven provided my escape from all the cruelty my soul has sustained. By this my friendly keeper's happy means, that Jove, surcharged with pity of our wrongs, will pour it down in showers on our heads, scourging the pride of cursed Tamburlaine.
I have 100,000 men in arms, some that, in conquest of the perjured Christian, being a handful to a mighty host, think them in number yet sufficient to drink the river Nile or Euphrates, and for their power enough to win the world.
And I, as many from Jerusalem, Judea, Gaza, and Sclavonia's bounds, that on Mount Sinai and with their ensigns spread, look like the party-coloured clouds of heaven, that show fair weather to the neighbour morn.
And I, as many bring from Trebizon, Caio, Famastro, and Amasia, all bordering on the Mare Major Sea, Riso, Sansina, and the bordering towns that touch the end of famous Euphrates, whose courages are kindled with the flames the cursed Scythian sets on all their towns, and vow to burn the villain's cruel hearts.
From Soria, with 70,000 strong, ta'en from Aleppo, Soldino, Tripoli, and so unto my city of Damascus, I march to meet and aid my neighbour kings, all which will join against this Tamburlaine, and bring him captive to your highness' feet.
Our battle then, in martial manner pitched, according to our ancient use, shall bear the figure of the semicircled moon, whose horns shall sprinkle through the tainted air the poisoned brains of this proud Scythian.
Well then, my noble lords, for this my friend that freed me from the bondage of my foe, I think it requisite and honourable to keep my promise and to make him king. That is, a gentleman, I know, at least.
Ah, good, I've managed to double myself twice. Someone jump in and read that.
That's no matter, sir, for being a king, or Tamburlaine came up of nothing.
Your Majesty may choose some pointed time, performing all your promise to the full. 'Tis naught for your Majesty to give a kingdom.
Then will I shortly keep my promise, Almeda.
Why, I thank your Majesty.
Almost made the doubling work. Got it slightly wrong there. Okay. So what do we think of this alliance? How do we feel with Callapine and Orcanes?
Could go either way, but it seems from the outset pretty strong.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as these guys tend to think from the language again that they use, that they think very much outside the box. So you never know. This could work.
I haven't read to the end of the play. I'm not hopeful. but I do wonder, actually, because Orcanes is, because he's the first character that has shown a little bit of integrity. I wonder if he is going to be the one who actually, you know, triumphs in the end, doesn't get slaughtered, and manages to win the day. Maybe, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe I'm reading too much into the fact that he actually appears to have some moral fibre.
Well, it's
overrated quality.
It's interesting because Orcanes is effectively the sponsor setting up Callapine's return to power.
Yeah.
So in a sense, he's a kingmaker. So it suggests that there's already an exchange where they kind of he can rely on Callapine because he's got a really good reason to hate Tamburlaine, but also he is sort of his creature to some degree. So there's a much greater bond. It's not like there's the Christian Muslim question there, where the Christians immediately betrayed their allies and calling on God and using religion as an excuse. You don't sense that here.
No, but then you've also got to think back to part one and think, well, Theridamas was supposedly going to be kingmaker for Khosrow, wasn't he? And that didn't end well.
Yeah.
I
tend to go along with what Sarah's saying about Orcanes being the good guy, so to speak, and also what's his name? Callipino, whatever his name is, Callapine.
Yeah.
When we had that first scene earlier, where he was asking Almeda to help him escape, he too is following through on his promise that he made to somebody earlier on in the play. And the fact is, like, just good guys, bad guys, he is the revenge factor for his father Bajazeth against Tamburlaine. So I'm thinking that this is the combo that's going to take Tambo down.
Oh, that's where because we know Tamburlaine is fated to die in the narrative that we've got, or certainly on the way down, but we don't know how. So let's see where this goes.
See where it's going.
Okay, we move into the next scene. We're back at the camp of Tamburlaine again. Lots of sons wandering about. It's mostly sons and Tambo. Let's see how the family drama goes. We have got at least one of his followers also at the very end. One of his lieutenants turns up. But here's a fun opening stage direction. Enter Tamburlaine and his three sons, Calyphas, Amyras, and Celebinus. Usumcasane, 4 attendants bearing the hearse of Zenocrate and the drums, sounding a doleful march, the town burning.
So burn the turrets of this cursed town, flamed the highest region of the air, and kindle heaps of exhalations that, being fiery meteors, may presage death and destruction to the inhabitants. Over my zenith hang a blazing star that may endure till heaven be revolved, fed with the supply of earthly dregs, threatening a dearth of this land. Flying dragons, lightning, fearful thunderclaps singe these fair plains and make them seem as black as the island where the Furies mask, compassed with Lethe, Styx, and Phlegethon, because my dear Zenocrate is dead.
This pillar, placed in memory of her, wherein Arabian, Hebrew, Greek is writ, this town, being burnt by Tamburlaine the Great, forbids the world to build it up again.
And here this is it me?
Yep.
And here this mournful streamer shall be placed, wrought with the Persian and Egyptian arms, to signify she was a princess born, and wife unto the monarch of the East.
And here this table is a register of all her virtues and perfections.
And here the picture of Zenocrate, to shew her beauty which the world admired, sweet picture of divine Zenocrate, that hanging here will draw the gods from heaven, and cause the stars fixed in the southern arc, whose lovely faces never any viewed, that have not passed the centre's latitude, as pilgrims travel to our hemisphere, only to gaze upon Zenocrate. Thou shalt not beautify Larissa plains, but keep within the circle of mine arms. At every town and castle I besiege, thou shalt be set upon my royal tent. And when I meet an army in the field, those looks which shed such influence in my camp, as if Bellona, goddess of the war, threw naked swords and sulphur balls of fire upon the heads of all our enemies. And now, my lords, advance your spears again. Sorrow no more, my sweet Cassane now. Boys, leave to mourn. This town shall ever mourn, being burnt to cinders for your mother's death.
If I had wept a sea of tears for her, would not ease the sorrows I sustain.
As is that town, so is my heart consumed with grief and sorrow for my mother's death.
My mother's death hath mortified my mind, and sorrow stops the passage of my speech.
But now, my boys, leave off, and list to me. That mean to teach you rudiments of war. I'll have you learn to sleep upon the ground, march in your armour through watery fens, sustain the scorching heat and freezing cold, hunger and thirst, right adjuncts of the war. And, after this, to scale a castle wall, besiege a fort, to undermine a town, and make whole cities a caper in the air. Then next, the way to fortify your men. In champion grounds, what figure serves you best, for which the kinkered angle form is meet? Because the corners there may fall more flat, whereas the fort may fittest be assailed, and sharpest where the assault is desperate. The ditches must be deep, the counterscarps narrow and steep, the walls made high and broad, the bulwarks and the rampires large and strong, with cavallerios and thick counterforts, and room within to lodge 6,000 men. It must have privy ditches, countermines, and secret issuings to defend the ditch. It must have high argins and covered ways to keep the bulwark fronts from battery, and parapets to hide the musketeers, casemates to place the great artillery, and store of ordnance, that from every flank may scour the outward curtains of the fort, dismount the cannon of the adverse part, murder the foe, and save the walls from breach. When this is learned for service on the land, by plain and easy demonstration, I'll teach you how to make the water mount, that you may dry foot march through lakes and pools, deep rivers, havens, creeks, and little seas, and make a fortress in the raging waves, fenced with the concave of a monstrous rock, invincible by nature of the place. When this is done, then are ye soldiers, and worthy sons of Tamburlaine the Great.
My lord, but this is dangerous to be done. We may be slain or wounded ere we learn.
Villain, art thou the son of Tamburlaine, and fearst to die? Or with a curtal axe to hew thy flesh and make a gaping wound? Hast thou beheld a peal of ordnance strike a ring of pikes, mingled with shot and horse, whose shattered limbs, being tossed as high as heaven, hang in the air as thick as sunny motes? And canst thou, coward, stand in fear of death? Hast thou not seen my horsemen charge the foe, shot through the arms, cut o'erwart the hands, dyeing their lances with their streaming blood, and yet at night carouse within my tent, filling their empty veins with airy wine, that, being concocted, turns to tip crimson blood? And wilt thou shun the field for fear of wounds? View me, thy father that hath conquered kings, and with his host marched round about the earth, quite void of scars, and clear from any wound, but by the wars lost not a drop of blood, and see him lance his flesh to teach you all.
He cuts his arm.
A wound is nothing, but it ne'er so deep. Blood is the god of war's rich livery. Now look I like a soldier, and this wound as a grace and majesty to me, as if a chair of gold, enamelled, encased with diamonds, spheres, rubies, and fairest pearl of wealthy India were mounted here under a canopy. And I sat down, clothed with a massy robe that late adorned the Afric potent, whom I brought abound to Damascus's walls. Come, boys, and with your fingers search my wound, and in my blood wash all your hands at once, while I sit smiling to behold the sight. Now, boys, what think ye of a wound?
I know not what I should think of it. Methinks 'tis a pitiful sight.
'Tis nothing. Give me a wound, father.
And me another, my lord.
Come, sirrah, give me your arm.
Here, father, cut it bravely as you did your own.
Shall suffice thou darst abide a wound. My boy, thou shalt not lose a drop of blood before we meet the army of the Turk, but then run desperate through the thickest throngs, dreadless of blows, of bloody wounds and death, and let the burning of Larissa walls, my speech of war, and this my wound you see, teach you, my boys, to bear courageous minds, fit for the foes of great Tamburlaine. Usumcasane, now come, let us march towards Techelles Theridamas, that we have sent before to fire the towns, the towers and cities of these hateful Turks, and hunt that coward faint heart run away with that accursed traitor Almeda till fire and sword have.
I long to pierce his bowels with my sword that hath betrayed my gracious sovereign, that cursed and damned traitor Almeda.
Then let us see if coward Callapine dare levy arms against our puissance, that we may tread upon his captive neck and treble all his father's slaveries.
Exuent. Oh my word. Okay. This sort of obscene distortion of the Doubting Thomas episode.
Yeah.
And it's the way that, again, it's the moment. Zenocrate is dead, so now I can teach the kids my way. And it's not good. And you can, and I think we've got to keep the children young. Note, I think if they were young in the earlier scene, they're still young now, and they'll age a little later in the narrative, because that scene when he basically grabs the young Doubting Thomas, and you know he's got his knife or his sword, and then he cuts his arm in front of him. I mean that's just horrific. And if you have the child as young rather than a young man, then that's just even more. I mean, he's just lost it. And all within the background of a burning town. This is an astounding piece of dramaturgy. This is really, really fascinating. Thoughts from the room?
He really has become the devil incarnate, hasn't he? I mean, burning. I mean, if you think about it, burning cities, torturing his sons, slashing his own arm with no flinch. This is gonna get really, really nasty, I think now.
Well, it's not only that. You've got the other sons going, cut me, Daddy.
Yeah.
No, I know that. I don't know what's more disturbing, actually. The kids' responses, and there's only one kid who's going, "No, I'm not sure. Actually, this is, he's calling his father out in a weird sort of way. I mean, he's calling it pitiful."
Yeah, and I think, actually, the Calyphas, he's kind of in a way the strongest one, because he's the only one who's, able to say to his father that, the other two just, I feel like, would mirror back whatever Tamburlaine said. And Calyphas is the only one who seems to have his own mind.
Yes, he says, can we do a risk assessment on this whole training program that you've laid out for us?
Yeah.
And it's actually perfectly, it's not an unreasonable request, I suppose, for a small child.
No.
No, I'm just going to cut my arm in front of you.
Like, yeah, like I say, devil incarnate himself. I mean, no flinch, no nothing. And, it's, I don't know what to say, really. I think that's rather horrifying to watch and disturbing for a kid.
Yeah.
It just makes you think, doesn't it, guys? That we're actually really lucky to have the support systems in place that we do now, as opposed to then.
I think this is the most disturbing scene of the plays so far. Actually, we've had people in cages. That is not as disturbing as this.
Yeah, and it is interesting as well that it's been getting progressively bloodier and more violent. But this really disturbing, this kind of ramp up to the next level of just disturbing and icky. And the sons in particular, it's like you've got the combination, you've got the personal horror of the fact that he's doing this to his sons. And then, like you said, the background of the fact that this horrendous act of this city being burned and presumably all the residents burnt alive. It's interesting that this is coming in now. Going back to what we were saying earlier, is maybe Orcanes being set up as some kind of heroic antidote to this. It's like now we've got this character who's maybe gonna do something about it. It's like Marlowe set him up and introduced him, and now we've got Tamburlaine just descending into even deeper levels of just horror and just awful. Yeah.
I mean, so go, Alan.
I'm just wondering, in fact, whether there is a resonance back to ancient Greek stories, because in some ways, the way he's reacting, it's almost Spartan.
Oh, yeah, true.
And the Blood Brothers thing, and you can see modern day resonances with, inner London gangs.
It's this any emotional response has to be turned into conflict, has to be turned into war. And because that's all he now knows. I mean, just as an emotional response as well, going back to the first session we did on Tamburlaine, for those who weren't here, we came out of those first two acts going, Tamburlaine's quite cool, he's great. He's a bit murdery, but he's fun. He's fun. He's not fun anymore.
No.
And are we now supposed to root for the opposition?
Because there has to be some light, doesn't there? There has to be, like, if someone's going to go into such darkness, just for the sake of the audience, there has to be someone who you can root for, or at least,
do we? That's the question.
Or at least think, well, maybe he's going to provide some light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe he isn't. I don't know what's going to happen. He's probably just going to end. It's probably all going to go really pear-shaped for him. But but it's like it's like Marlowe can't let Tamburlaine become just so horrendously dark without providing another character who, maybe we'll root for him now instead, kind of thing.
Yeah. And the other kind of dissenting voice, the other kind of contrasting voice that we are getting is the son Calyphas. But I think him being so close to Tamburlaine, that's rather than kind of giving a little sense of hope, I'm getting a strong impending sense of doom for Calyphas.
Well, I'm not going to lead the witnesses. There is a couple of short. There's a couple of bits to go before we go into extra time, and I just want to try and rattle through this a side episode that we've got coming up here with Theridamas and Techelles and some skirmishing going on. I want to just try and power through this before the end of the session, that we may discuss it in more detail next time. So we'll put this to one side because we're going to a slightly different place in the world. Battle is occurring. Enter Techelles, Theridamas, and their train. And I'm playing Theridamas, so I should start talking, shouldn't I?
Mm-hmm.
Thus have we marched northward from Tamburlaine unto the frontier point of Soria, and this is Balsera, their chiefest hold, wherein is all the treasure of the land.
Then let us bring our light artillery, minions, false nets, and sakers to the trench, filling the ditches with the wall's wide breach, and enter into seize upon the hold. How say you, soldiers? Shall we not?
Yes,
Yes,
my lord. Yes,
Yes, come. Let's
about it.
But stay a while, summon a parley, drum. It may be they will yield it quietly, knowing 2 kings, the friends to Tamburlaine, stand at the walls with such a mighty power. A parley is sounded. Captain appears on the walls with Olympia, his wife, and his son. Have I got a bit of too much of doubling with Techelles there and Olympia? So
I think we should be okay, actually.
okay, so you're now going to be you'll be Techelles for the moment. Yes.
What require you, my masters?
Captain, that thou yield up thy hold to us.
To you? Why, do you think me weary of it?
Nay, Captain, thou art weary of thy life, if thou withstand the friends of Tamburlaine.
These pioneers of Argia in Africa, even in the cannon's face, shall raise a hill of earth and faggots higher than thy fort, and over thy arraigns and covered ways shall play upon the bulwarks of thy hold volleys of ordnance, till the breach be made, that with his ruin fills up all the trench, and when we enter in, not heaven itself shall ransom thee, thy wife, and family.
Captain, these Moors shall cut the leaden pipes that bring fresh water to thy men and thee, and lie in trench before thy castle walls, that no supply of victual shall come in, nor any issue forth, but they shall die, and therefore, Captain, yield it quietly.
Were you that are friends of Tamburlaine, brothers of Holy Mahomet himself, I would not yield it. Therefore, do your worst. Raise mounts, batter, entrench, and undermine, cut off the water, all convoys that can, yet I am resolute, and so, farewell.
And the captain, Olympia, and son retire from the walls. Pioneers away! And where I stuck the stake in trench with those dimensions I described, cast up the earth towards the castle wall, which, till it may defend you, labour low, and few or none shall perish by their shot.
We will, my
My
lord.
lord.
Excellent pioneers.
100 horse shall scout about the plains to spy what force comes to relieve the hold. Both we, Theridamas, will entrench our men, and with the Jacob's staff measure the height and the distance of the castle from the trench, that we may know if our artillery will carry full point blank unto their walls.
Then see the bringing of our ordnance along the trench into the battery, where we will have gabbins of 6 foot broad to save our cannoneers from musket shot, betwixt which shall our ordnance thunder forth, and with the breaches fall, smoke, fire, and dust, the crack, the echo, and the soldier's cry, make deaf the air and dim the crystal sky.
Trumpets and drums, alarum presently, and soldiers, play the men. The hold is yours.
Alarums within, enter the captain with Olympia and his son.
Come, good my lord, and let us haste from hence, along the cave that leads beyond the foe. No hope is left to save this conquered hold.
A deadly bullet, gliding through my side, lies heavy on my heart. I cannot live. I feel my liver pierced, and all my veins, that there begin and nourish every part, mangled and torn, and all my entrails bathed in blood that straineth from their orifice. Farewell, sweet wife. Sweet son, farewell. I die.
He indeed dies.
Death, whither art thou gone that both we live? Come back again, sweet death, and strike us both. 1 minute and our days, and 1 sepulchre contain our bodies. Death, why comest thou not? Well, this must be the messenger for thee.
And she draws a dagger.
Now, ugly death, stretch out thy sable wings, and carry both our souls where he remains. Tell me, sweet boy, art thou condemned to die? These barbarous Scythians full of cruelty, and Moors in whom was never pity found, will hew us piecemeal, put us to the wheel, or else invent some torture worse than that. Therefore, die by loving mother's hand, who gently now will lance thy ivory throat, and quickly rid thee of both of pain and life.
Mother, dispatch me, or I'll kill myself. For think you I can live and see him dead? Give me your knife, good mother, or strike home. The Scythians shall not tyrannize on me. Sweet mother, strike, that I may meet my father.
She stabs him and he dies.
Oh, sacred Mahomet, if this be sin, entreat a pardon of the God of heaven, and purge my soul before it come to thee.
And she burns the body of her husband and son, and then attempts to kill herself, as interrupted by Theridamas, Techelles, and all their train.
Do you want me to take Techelles?
Oh, please,
Yes, that
that'd be
would make
great.
sense.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Is now Techelles. How now, madam? What are you doing?
Killing myself, as I have done my son, whose body with his father's I have burnt, lest cruel Scythians should dismember him.
'Twas bravely done, and like a soldier's wife. Thou shalt with us to Tamburlaine the Great, who, when he hears how resolute thou wert, will match thee with a viceroy or a king.
My lord deceased was dearer unto me than any viceroy, king, or emperor, and for his sake here will I end my days.
But, lady, go with us to Tamburlaine, and thou shalt see a man greater than Mahomet, in whose high looks is much more majesty than from the concave superficies of Jove's vast palace, the imperial orb, unto the shining bower where Cynthia sits, like lovely Thetis in a crystal robe, that treadeth fortune underneath his feet, and makes the mighty god of arms his slave, on whom death and the fatal sisters wait, with naked swords and scarlet liveries, before whom, mounted on a lion's back, Ramanusia bears a helmet full of blood, and strows the way with brains of slaughtered men, by whose proud side the ugly furies run, hearkening when he shall bid them plague the world, over whose zenith, clothed in windy air, and eagle's wings joined to her feathered breast, fame hovereth, sounding of her golden trump, that to the adverse poles of that straight line which measureth the glorious frame of heaven, the name of mighty Tamburlaine is spread, and him, fair lady, shall thy eyes behold. Come.
Take pity of a lady's rueful tears, that humbly craves upon her knees to stay, and cast her body in the burning flame that feeds upon her son's and husband's flesh.
Madam, sooner shall fire consume us both than scorch a face so beautiful as this, in frame of which nature hath showed more skill than when she gave eternal chaos form, drawing it from the shining lamps of heaven.
Madam, I am so far in love with you that you must go with us. No remedy.
Then carry me, I care not where you will, and let by the end of this my fateful journey be likewise end to my accursed life.
No, madam, but the beginning of your joy. Come willingly, therefore.
Soldiers, now let us meet the general, who by this time is at Natolia, ready to charge the army of the Turk. The gold, the silver, and the pearl we got rifling this fort divide in equal shares. This lady shall have twice so much again out of the coffers of our treasury. And there we stop. I think we can only say, the only thing I want to say here, which is sort of breaking our rule, is that Theridamas feels like he's trying to do the fanboy version of Zenocrate and Tamburlaine in the first part. Techelles seems quite keen as well, but there's an implied threat of violence when they're talking about love rather than anything else there. about where this goes. And it's quite a horrific scene that runs up to it. The murdering of your own child, and then this lengthy action, surely, of burning the corpses.
Right?
Is there something missing here? Is there a scene in between? Sorry, William.
It's so amazing, these turnarounds that are expected that happen within. You have this incredibly moving scene where she kills her son, who begs her to kill him first. She stabs him, he dies. Then she burns the bodies, which must take forever. And then these guys come in and try and actually turn her around. They don't just try to. She actually gives up and says, like, no, carry me away. As if, like, sweep her up in his arms, and, the big macho man goes off with the love of his life, which he suddenly found. It's like, it's amazing how you have this massive pathos of this scene turning into this idea of her immediately falling in love and traveling off to her joy for the rest of her life with these guys who have caused all of this.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. It's a crazy turnaround. It's a sort of, especially from her perspective, like, the sequence of events that she's just gone through is unthinkable. But I don't think that by the end she's being swept off her feet.
No.
I think she's being be likewise end to my accursed life is not to me a, I've been swept line.
Yeah, it's almost like she's saying, "Do what thou wilt. I have nothing."
It's the thing is that actually the power to commit suicide is sort of currently lacking in her. I think is more the thing there. I think we've got to remember that we know this text has been cut. We know that there should be some comedy. We don't know if the comedy is just random lines of dialogue or whether there's actual scenes. And if there's ever a cue for a potential scene that's missing, it's in the middle of this one. Because it feels logical to me that she kills the son, exit, scene happens, new scene, burning bodies. That's the beginning. That feels like a kind of thing you would do. It doesn't seem to fit stagecraft as they were perfectly capable of doing. Right. Unless this is a set piece that is supposed to go on for 20 minutes.
The problem is that how you could put any sort of material into the middle of that scene.
Oh no, you'd have a separate scene.
Be a major jar.
Well, the tonal shifts are all the rage. But I don't know. I mean, you can do it all the way through, and presumably people have. But that scene would therefore be twice as long as it looks on the page. This is an epic piece of action.
Sorry, I have no answer to the question you've just asked.
We don't need to have answers. We just need to ask questions.
That's the question. But one thing that occurs to me about Olympia, she is trying to commit suicide from what it says in the stage directions when Techelles and Theridamas come in. She's about to kind of off herself and they stop her. And then the fact that she just sort of goes limp, again, just shoehorning some modern psychology in there. She's in shock, isn't she? It's like she's I'm going to, I've killed, my husband has died, I've killed my son at his request, I'm now going to burn the bodies because that's the honourable thing to do, and then I'm going to kill myself. And then they come and interrupt her plan, and it's like, once she can't follow through on her plan anymore, she goes into shock, which is what she would do. And then it's like, oh yeah, just carry me away, whatever, my life is accursed and I can't think for myself at the moment. So again, there's quite an authentic psychology underpinning that scene there, even though it is a bit of a strange scene. I think there is something quite truthful in her psychology.
I think my shock for this scene is coming actually from the reactions of Techelles and Theridamas also. Theridamas literally says, "Madam, I am so far in love with you that you must go with us. No remedy." I mean, he is moon-faced cow in love with her as quickly as what? I mean,
do you think there was a little scene cut where Cupid comes in with one of his arrows and shoots him?
Well, I think the other thing to remember is that this is setting up a hare for later in the play. And that we'll be able to discuss this with a little more authority a little later on. It's and there's a lot of potential depth to what's going on here. Just talking about the plays so far, we're sort of past the halfway mark, just about. We'll see whether we can complete it tomorrow. I'd like to. We could just about do it, possibly slightly going into extra time. But it's just the question I've been noting down. You know, what is this play as an individual play? We've got death, we've got inheritance, we've got betrayal, we've got revenge, we've got all the things. But there seem to be almost too many things going on here at the moment, and it's exciting and it's interesting and it's horrifying. In a way that the first play is much tidier, but in many ways is much less the first play is much more clear cut, and this one there's a lot to sift here that really interests me, which is why it's always frustrating that this is the play that gets cut right down to nothing if it gets done. When there's actually so much here that's just feels like it needs to be expanded, not contracted. Any last thoughts as we're now, I say, well into extra time?
You're suggesting that this should actually be a mini series at minimum.
Oh yeah, this would make a fascinating 10-part Netflix series. I think you could really go for that.
Can I just say there was a reference to flying dragons?
Yes.
Yeah.
Noticed that too. Daenerys.
Going back to the Game of Thrones.
And also Marlowe himself, because he had, I think there's one in Faustus. So there's a bit of overlap. So I say, any last thoughts as we're very much where we are?
Nope, think not.
No.
I think we're all in shock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't do a trigger warning, so I'm sorry. Right. Well, tomorrow, as I say, we will endeavour to crack on to the end of the play. It's about the same amount of words as we did today, so we should be able to do it. I think the only scene that's really untidy, if we don't have more bodies, will be the first scene we tackle. So we may have to go through that quite slowly, or I might just condense all of the random kings down into one speaker, because they don't say anything excessively different to each other. And then we'll hopefully complete Tamburlaine tomorrow. This has been a really fascinating journey so far. I'm really liking this as a process. I've really enjoyed it myself.
Me too.
And say hopefully we'll continue this next week with a different set of plays as well.
Yep.
Otherwise, thank you very much for your contributions, everyone. I will now stop recording and say fare thee well, everyone.